Welcome into One of One Sports, the only one for your original sports commentary and analysis. I'm John Barry, and the college football playoffs first round was this weekend, so let's talk about it. All right, so we had 4 first round playoff games, and we are going to discuss all of those one by one. And then at the end, we are also going to talk about the format of the college football playoff. There's a lot of talk around the G5 teams. I'm going to give my take on that, what I think are fair criticisms and unfair criticisms. So stay tuned till the end for that. But we will open with the Friday night game of Alabama at Oklahoma. And I picked Alabama. For the record, I got all 4 games right. We had one perfect prediction week all season, and then I got all 4 playoff games right, which, again, it's only 4 games, but if you watch some of the biggest prognosticators out there, Josh Pate, Joel Klatt, you would have got 2 in 2 weekends. So we did perform pretty well, called both upsets in Alabama and Miami. But it didn't look good at the start, right? Alabama goes down 17-0, and this Oklahoma team looked like something I had not seen, no, I won't say all year, but at least for a little while, probably since the John Mateer injury, as they came out, moved the ball really well in Alabama. And of course, all the other concerns I had, like Alabama not being able to run the ball, I knew that was going to be the case. Could they handle the pass rush of Oklahoma? Early on, they could not. That was materializing as well. And then also, what were the receivers going to be doing? Ty Simpson's under pressure. Can someone get open quick? No, not really. So all the potential issues I had picking Alabama were popping up. And then all the worries I had, like, can John Mateer play better? Is his Oklahoma offense with 2 weeks off going to be looking better than it did in the LSU game or the Texas game? Like, all of those games down the stretch. All of that early looked to be the case. And on top of that, all the concerns I had of playing on the road in the Palace on the Prairie for their first ever playoff game at night, on a first ever home playoff game, at home on a Friday night. That looked to be super concerning, as well as Alabama's offensive line was struggling a lot. They looked rattled. And when they went down 17-0, I was like, okay, I got this one wrong. And then let me see I wrote down the exact timestamp here. Let me pull it up. Yeah, so 3rd and 3 with 4 minutes, 30 seconds left in the second quarter. That is when everything changed. And if you remember, Alabama scored. So it's 17-7, and it's 3rd and 3. Oklahoma is driving, and John Mateer runs out of the pocket, and he has 2 options. He can either scramble to pick up the first down, or he can throw downfield, where he does have an open receiver. I think it's actually a running back who's lined up as a receiver coming across, right? And it's 3rd down. He chooses to kind of contort his body, throw the ball. It ends up going through the receiver's hands. So there's a couple issues with what he did here, right? So it's 3rd down. You have the momentum. The correct thing to do, especially if it's a difficult throw, which, although he made a solid throw, if you have to contort your body, twist back while on the move, like, that is too tough of a throw to be attempting on 3rd and 3. He should have ran, right? That's just what he should have done correctly. That being said, once he made the other decision, he made a good enough throw where the receiver could have caught it, probably should have caught it, and then it's probably a touchdown. Like, he's got to step on the guy. There's no one in front of him. And then we're looking at Oklahoma 24-7 with, what are we looking at? 4 minutes left in the half, and it looks, for all intents and purposes, like the game is going to be over. But instead, John Mateer doesn't scramble, the receiver doesn't catch it, it's incomplete, and then Oklahoma's punting. And that is when everything changed, because then the punter, this is where the entire Oklahoma collapse happens. The punter just drops the ball. I don't think I'd ever seen that before. Obviously, I've seen block punts. I've seen the punter not catch the ball. I've never seen him catch it, walk up, and then just drop it, like, right in front of him. And that leads to Alabama points. And then after that, John Mateer makes the worst decision he made all game, worse than the 3rd and 3 by far, on what was a combination of miscommunication with the receiver and also a really bad throw. Because even if, I'm talking about the pick 6 here, if the receiver runs what Mateer apparently thought he was running or going to run, like, he still threw it way out where the DB would have jumped the route. So that's a pick 6. And now we're tie game going into half. And now everything's changed. The momentum has shifted, and all the things Alabama struggled with in the first half were gone. And all the things Oklahoma was doing well were suddenly gone. Now, Alabama's pass rush was too much for Oklahoma's offensive line, and Alabama was handling the OU defensive line much better. Ty Simpson stepping into throws, making big-time throws downfield. The Jerry Bernard, like, on the helmet catch, who caught it in the end zone in the, what would that have been, the left corner, right? So Ty Simpson's now stepping into throws, hitting guys. Receivers are doing their thing, and the Alabama defense is imposing their will. And then Oklahoma, a team that a lot of people have been calling kind of like Iowa SEC, defense, special teams, right? What did we see? No, it was the Alabama defense that made the big turnover, the pick 6. And Oklahoma's special teams were just disastrous. You had your All-American Lou Groza award kicker missed 2 field goals when he hadn't missed since his first attempt of the year, and that prevented any attempt at a onside kick to try to tie the game late. And of course, the punt, which put Alabama back in the game as well. So disastrous special teams effort. Alabama imposed their will more defensively, and yeah, it looked for a while like Oklahoma had it, and then everything shifted, and it was kind of the inverse of game one, where Alabama outgained Oklahoma by almost like 200 yards, I think, if I remember correctly, was better on third down, more first downs, more passing and rush yards. Like everything was in Alabama's favor except the turnover battle. They lost substantially and included a Ty Simpson pick six. This was the opposite. Oklahoma played better for a large stretch of the first half, but had the major turnover. And because of that, they didn't pull away, left Alabama hanging around, and Alabama then is able to get the win. This had major implications for Kalen DeBoer, potentially. Like, I don't think he was ever leaving to Michigan. I've said that, but a lot of people seem to think if he had lost, it was on the board. Now, going into another game, I really think we can kill that narrative. I think, I'll say it, Kalen DeBoer will not be the next head coach at Michigan. But also, they're obviously going to continue their playoff track. And this is where, like, I gave a lot of praise to Alabama so far. I thought the comeback was amazing. You did a lot of things really well on the Oklahoma defense. That's really good. But I will say this did not look like a team that if I'm Indiana, well, if I'm an India fan, I'm particularly worried about. You still have no run game, and you're not going to run the ball in Indiana. These receivers, especially like Ryan Williams, isn't going to do anything, which he did nothing, is going up against what I think is the best secondary in the college football playoff when you have these ball hawk safeties in Farrell and in Moore. And then on top of that, you have maybe the best cover corner in the playoffs in D'Angelo Pons. I don't think you can just win passing the ball in Indiana. They also have a good front seven. They have a great linebacking group. And then defensively, Indiana's just so much more balanced. Indiana has the Heisman winner. So yeah, for me, like watching this game, though Alabama was able to come back, get the win, that's great for them. There was nothing I saw that made me think that's a team that can beat Indiana on a neutral field. Maybe I changed. Maybe I watch it back. Maybe I think about it more. But right now, it's hard for me to imagine Alabama doing anything more than beating Oklahoma. I picked them to beat Oklahoma because I thought Oklahoma was the worst non-G5 team in the playoff, but right after that was Alabama. So nothing about that changed my mind, but it was a little bit too down for a team that just won a playoff game. So just congratulations, Alabama. Look, maybe I'll be wrong, but for now, let's move on to Miami, Texas A&M. And this was an interesting one because I saw people saying it was a bad game. Like, I disagree. I thought it was entertaining despite the low score. And I do think the fact that it was so low scoring, as someone who had a rooting interest, I do root for Miami. I don't know why. I just like Miami for pretty much no reason. Every play felt like, every big play felt like the game could completely change. So the Marcel Reed fumble felt huge. When Malachi Tony when Ruben Bain blocked the kick, that felt huge. When Malachi Tony almost returned the touchdown, but then gets barely tripped up, and then Miami missed field goal, like everything felt huge. And we had, a ton of mistakes. Missed field goal by A&M, 3 missed field goals by Miami. Special teams, like I said, Malachi Tony could have returned it. It didn't. He had 3 turnovers by Marcel Reed with the fumble and 2 interceptions. You had Malachi Tony fumbling late. So there were a ton of mistakes, but I don't think it made the game bad. Sloppy, sure, but I thought it was very entertaining despite the low score. No score in the first half. I still was very entertained throughout the game. It was competitive. It was close. We saw a lot of great matchups between Miami's defensive line and Texas A&M's offensive line and vice versa. And that does segue into my next point, which is I broke down the keys to this game in my prediction video, right? And I said, talk about the pass rush battles. I said, A&M leads the nation in sacks, but I don't think they'll be as good as Miami will be against their offensive line. You had the A&M offensive line talking trash about Ruben Bain. Well, Ruben Bain had, 3 sacks and a blocked field goal? It might have been 4 sacks. He was really, really, really good. And Mesidor was also quite good in this game, and they were clearly the better pass rush, and that's coming from an A&M team led by Cassius Howell that led the nation in sacks. Miami's offensive line performed much better than Texas A&M's. That was my number one key to the game. Then I said, who can establish the run game? I didn't think Texas A&M would be able to, and I thought Miami could do a little bit better because of what Texas did against Texas A&M, and that was a Texas team that struggled running the ball. And what did we see? Mark Fletcher have his best game of the year, 170 yards or so on the ground. Best, just MVP level performance out of Mark Fletcher. And then finally, I talked about Carson Beck versus Marcel Reed. I said Miami hasn't really struggled with dual threat quarterbacks. So it's going to be about which quarterback can drop back in the pocket and not more so make plays downfield, but avoid the mistakes. And I said, I think Marcel Reed is just too turnover prone, and Beck can be as well, but Beck's turnovers do come in bunches. So I said if he makes one, then it could pile on and he can lose Miami the game. But if he doesn't, then he might be more pedestrian. But Marcel Reed is, he can be in the midst of a game, make a ton of awesome plays and some really bad plays. And we saw all of that. The fumble was more so about the pressure, but then the other two interceptions, especially the last one, which lost them the game, were all like, it was all encompassing of Marcel Reed's season, where he's just been, it's too high and low. It was in the Texas game, he made some bad mistakes. Even in the South Carolina game, which you won, you had a ton of turnovers and a ton of really good plays. Right now, you got to take the good and the bad with Marcel Reed. Maybe another year in college, which he's coming back, he can clean it up and be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. But what really held him back this all season, really, and then in this game, was the turnovers, and it's the reason Miami won the game. Because in such a low-scoring affair where both teams had their mistakes and Miami missed all the field goals, it did end up coming down to turnovers, namely, the last one cost the game. And if you're A&M, I do think you're looking back on this like, how? Like, we get a home playoff game. We're in Kyle Field. Obviously, I said you're at home, so it's kind of repetitive. But, first time ever in the college football playoff, and we can't get more than 3 points. Like, it is an embarrassing performance by the Aggies. I think the fans have to be, obviously you're not upset at the season, but just disappointed that this is how it ends, because it does, even despite finally getting over the hump, making the playoff, the end result does feel probably really familiar to Aggies fans. And then I just want to end with a Mario Cristobal discussion, because I ranked him, I think, 11 out of 12 in the playoff coaches when I made my YouTube short. Check that out, by the way. Some great shorts on the channel. But I ranked him 11 out of 12, and there was some pushback. A lot of people thought he should be higher, which is fair. I understand that. And he won the game. But I don't trust his game management. And I think this was exemplified at the end when they give Malachi Tony the ball. They clearly did not coach him to go down if he breaks it, right? Which you have to do that, because I understand you still won the game and you picked off Marcel Reed, but it's about the process. It's not about the end result. Yes, you won the game. That's great. But it's about what gives you the highest chance to win. Is it Malachi Tony on that end around, running into the end zone and giving Marcel Reed and A&M over over 100 seconds to go score a touchdown, which in college football is a ton of time, and they got all the way down the field, and he had been playing his best ball on the drive before? So is that what gives you the best chance to win? Or is it, if you get the first down and you're right there at the one, take a knee, slide down, whatever, and then we run out the clock, or I know you don't trust your kicker, but he made the chip shot, and even then you could take a knee, take off some time, then QB sneak. Like, the best chance you had to win was to take more time off the clock, and that clearly wasn't coached to Malachi Tony in the huddle. It was just, an oversight, and I do think that's kind of the kind of thing I can't trust Mario Cristobal with. And I'm not trying to take away from him winning the game, but there's just these things that have come up over the course of his career, whether it be time management, game management, situational awareness stuff, that I don't trust with Cristobal. And when you're going up against college football playoff, you're versing the very best coaches in the country. You're going to verse Ryan Day, who's one of the best coaches. Ohio State doesn't make that kind of mistake very often. They're very disciplined. So yes, if Miami's going to beat Ohio State, you can play a low scoring game. Like, I saw people saying you can't beat Ohio State if you play that way. No, you can. Like, that's kind of how Indiana beat them, but you have to play clean. You have to make your field goals. You have to have better situational awareness. You can't turn the ball over. So you have to play a really good game. But if Miami wants to play low-scoring affair, Carson Beck game manager, try to run the ball, enforce your will on the defensive line, particularly on the edges with Bain and Mesidor, like, you can win a low-scoring game against Ohio State if you contain the passing game of Smith and Tate. But you're going to have to be, close to perfect, which Indiana was when they beat them. So I think there's a lot of positive for the Canes. I root for the Canes. So there was a lot I like, but there were warning signs. Like, I don't like the special teams gone awry. I don't like the end of game management. But I love the pass rush. I love that Beck, they were smart enough to not put the ball in Beck's hands at the end of the game. Like, just run the ball. But yeah, so there's a lot to like about the performance from Miami. And I do think they have a real shot against Ohio State. With that being said, let's now talk about the G5 games. Okay, first up, Tulane was at Ole Miss, and we got almost an exact repeat of game one. 41-10 by the Rebels. First game was 45-10. So yeah, it was pretty much, you could duplicate, copy, paste game one, put it here. almost no difference, which is good because that answers a lot of questions for Ole Miss about the whole Lane Kiffin leaving. When you come out in your first 5 plays, I think all go for 20 plus yards, you're like, okay, we're not going to struggle offensively. Charlie Weiss knows what he's doing at play call. He's been calling the plays all year. So the offense is still really good. Trinidad Chambliss is still really good. Kewan Lacey, still really good. So the offense didn't have any issues, and the defense gave a great performance, or maybe not great performance, but a really good performance against Tulane. I say not great because Tulane made some plays, but then it was either turnovers or turnovers on downs kind of stopped or halted some of these drives. So I wouldn't say great performance by the Ole Miss defense, but it was good, and they did what they were supposed to do. I don't think anyone thought this game was going to be close. I think I said 21-point win for the Rebels, so they beat them by more than I thought they would, winning by 31. But for the most part, everyone agreed it's going to be a big Ole Miss victory. It was just about how good would Ole Miss look, what kind of questions could they answer, and for the questions that they could answer in this type of game, they answered. Now, there's a lot of ones you couldn't answer, whether it be because it's against an inferior opponent or just the fact that, well, no, it's actually all pretty much because it's an inferior opponent, because we haven't seen Pete Golding in an intense situation, and now you're going up against arguably the best coach in college football in Kirby Smart in only your second ever playoff game. Well, he's a 2-time national champion, right? So coaching mismatches could pop up later. And then, we've seen the play calling of Charlie Weiss. Now, what about when it's more intense situations? What do you call? Does that trouble, or does any trouble come up there, right? So just heat of the moment stuff where you're not going to be tested against with that kind of thing against Tulane. That's the kind of questions they couldn't answer. But all the things you could answer about, can the offense still perform well? Is the team going to look bought in? Like, all that stuff was clearly answered, and the Rebels look good. And yes, they have a really very real chance to beat Georgia. And if you go back, the only game they lost all season was to Georgia, and it was really just the fourth quarter. Like, outside one quarter of football, you change just a few plays for Ole Miss, and they're undefeated. Instead of being the number 6 seed, they're probably the number 2 seed. They could be SEC champions, right? It was just one quarter where after 5 straight offensive touchdown drives against Georgia, their offense halted, Georgia slowed them down, and this Resilience Bulldogs team kind of did what they did all season. So Ole Miss is going to have to change some things around, make sure they can finish stronger, and we'll break that down later when we do predictions. But for now, congratulations to the Rebels. And then the other G5 game, which was, extremely high scoring, Oregon wins it 51-35, or was it 36? I have 35 written down. I don't know if I got it right. One sec. Okay, so it was actually 34, but I knew 35 didn't sound right. But 51-34, and it was 34-6 at halftime. So the game was not as close as the final score indicated, but because Oregon seemingly took their foot off the gas, which is disappointing because I do think for this Oregon team, there was a lot of sloppy play in the second half that looks, it's just not going to cut it when you play Texas Tech, or if you play Indiana down the road, or if you're in the national title. Like, the way they play the second half is simply not good enough. Dan Lanning knows that. Oregon knows that. The question is, can you play the way you did in the first half for a full game against better competition? Because Dante Moore, at times this game looked incredible, and that's when we see the super high ceiling of Oregon, because they have a lot of speed, and the defensive line is a ton of talent, and the offensive line might be the best in the country, and at times Dante Moore looks awesome. But there's also the 2 interceptions, specifically the second one, where when he got pressured, he made a big-time mistake. And then the defense in the second half allowed a ton of big plays for James Madison, which he just can't do. And I think they ended up allowing over 500 total yards of offense, which is just unacceptable. You can't do that. And Texas Tech, when Bear Morton's played, has had one of the best offenses in college football. And if Dante Moore struggled under the pressure when he was pressured against James Madison, specifically on the goal, was it 3rd and goal where he threw the pick? Like, can you imagine what's going to happen when he has David Bailey, Romello Height, AJ Holmes, Lee Hunter all coming at him on the defensive front? Like, that is very concerning. And that's why I say Oregon's ceiling is they can be the best team in the country. They can win the national title. But if they're not clicking on all cylinders, if Dante Moore slips up, or if they kind of get lackadaisical, we also saw a floor that is just lower than some of these other playoff teams have demonstrated. I've never seen Indiana look like that, or really Texas Tech when they're healthy. I haven't seen them look like that. Same with Ohio State. So the floor, I think, is lower than some of the top-end contenders, but the ceiling is just as high. And that's why I think you just have some things to clean up. And this is my national title pick. I still believe in them. And look, it was 17-point win. It was really, it was more dominant than that. But obviously I would have liked to see them just finish strong, blow out, win by 40 or whatever, and look really, really strong going into the Texas Tech game. The second half does raise a little bit of warning flags around the team as someone who picked them for the national title. Okay, so that is all 4 games, but we're not quite done. We have to talk about the narrative surrounding the G5 playoff teams because some of the criticisms I do think is very fair, but some of it I think is kind of bad faith arguments, and I'll explain right now. So obviously, James Madison lost by 17, not Ole Miss, Tulane lost by 31, and they were both blown out non-competitive games, and we want competitive playoff games. Well, all I'll say is last year, where there were no G5 teams in the first round of the playoff, because remember, Boise State got the bye. So there were no G5 teams in the playoff. And what did we get? We got an SEC team in Tennessee losing by 25, not competitive at all. We got ACC team in SMU losing by 28, not competitive at all. We had a Big Ten team in Indiana. I think they only lost by 10, but if you watch the game, I think they were down 27-3, if I remember correctly. Came back, lost 27-17. But that was not a competitive ball game, right? So we had 3 games of power conferences team from 3 different conferences, ACC, SEC, Big Ten, get blown out, non-competitive. And we weren't diagnosing like, oh, the whole SEC is bad, or oh, the SEC doesn't deserve to be in the playoff, or the Big Ten, or the ACC, right? That's not what happened. It's kind of confirmation bias, as people already think the G5 teams shouldn't be there, don't belong there, so then there's looking to make that claim when they lose by a bunch, right? I think that's what's happening here, and I don't think it's fair because we just go through the history of the playoff. I looked back, there were 10 years of the 4-team playoff. 4 of them had losses bigger in just the 2 games in the first round, bigger than what Tulane just suffered on Saturday, right? We had Michigan State got beat, was it 38-0 or 34-0 by Alabama? We had, oh man, I'm forgetting now, but it's Ohio State got beat by Clemson one year, I think 31-0. Like there have been, LSU beat Oklahoma by 35 points in the first round. So there have been a ton of blowouts over the course of the college football playoff. In fact, it's come to be expected. The exceptions were the Michigan, TCU games and the Ohio State, Georgia games. Like for the most part, it's a lot of blowouts. So I don't think it's fair to say because the G5 got blown out, they don't deserve to be in there. Especially when if the G5s had won the game, I don't think people would have come on here and said, well, the G5 validated it. We actually need to continue to guarantee. Like people already have what they want to happen and then are using the results as a case to back their desired outcome or whatever, right? Which I don't think is fair. But now I say all that to say G5 teams, we should not have 2 group of 5 teams in the college football playoff, right? All that can also be true. So I think some of the arguments are unfair or bad faith claims, but I also still believe we don't need 2 group of 5 teams in the playoff. In fact, I don't believe we need any group of 5 teams. I'm still an advocate for a separate G5 playoff where we can get a Tulane in there with, we could have the Mountain West champion. So Boise could be in there, joined by, James Madison. Like we could have all the G5 teams playing in their own playoff, which I think would be really cool and would be more of a fair shot. Because in the current model, yes, no group of 5 team is ever going to win the national championship. And it's even harder to pull upsets than it was a few years ago, now with all their transfer portal players being taken. And I talked about this briefly in a YouTube short. Like, you know where James Madison's best players are at? They're at Indiana. They're with Kirk Cignetti. Like, Elijah Surratt, star Indiana receiver, yeah, he's not at James Madison anymore. Or even the D linemen. Like, a lot of their best players are gone. It's the same thing with Tulane. You know where Tulane's best players are? The quarterbacks at Duke, and the running back transferred to Oregon. So it's just too hard to hold on to your best players to be competitive enough. So yes, I don't think we should have a guaranteed group of 5 playoff spots, and I think they should have their own thing. But that being said, they didn't perform. People are overstating how badly they performed. We've seen many performances just as bad, or if not worse than this, by power conference opponents. So I'm not using that to say they shouldn't be in there. I just think it's just reality. We can observe the sport and say the SEC and the Big Ten are playing at this level, and then the Big 12 and the ACC are playing at this level, and then the G5 teams are playing down off the screen. They're playing down here, right? So these teams are kind of playing a different sport at this point than even the ACC and the Big 12, but especially the SEC and the Big Ten. So that's why I don't think incorporating it into the playoff, it's just really for show. It's not really doing anything for the sport. And that is why I'm actually going to be debuting a few different college football playoff models. I think we can adapt. Some will be more radical than others. Some are more simple. I'm going to be debuting all of those, I believe, tomorrow. If worst case, it'll be I think it's going to be Tuesday. But yeah, look out on the channel for that, because I'm going to have what I think are some really cool, some really simple, and some, kind of just crazy potential changes to the college football playoff. And I do want feedback on what people think about that. So that's coming. But for now, that is all I have to say on the first round of the college football playoff. If you guys enjoyed, make sure you leave a like and subscribe. And thank you guys all for watching. And I'll see you guys next time.